Shlomo Gliedman. Apologies if I'm saying anyone's name wrong. Shlomo Gliedman is a PhD candidate in humanities at York University. He works in the intersections of religion and sexuality, focusing on Jewish queer literature and culture. And today he'll be speaking about bodily citationality and hermeneutical sex, text, image, and ritual as tools for queer intimacies. So take it away, Shlomo.
Thank you, Lee. Let me try sharing my screen again. All right, good morning everybody again. My Zoom virtual background, you can see a picture of Piazza del Duomo that I took last spring in the town of Crema near Milan in Italy. In this town, many of the scenes of Luca Guadagnino's film, Call Me By Your Name, were filmed. This scene is from the film. It's shot at the very same spot. Thanks to Guadagnino's film, the small town of Crema has become a major tourist destination, visited by numerous fans of the film from across the globe. The film Call Me By Your Name, which was released in Canada and the United States in 2017, was based on André Aciman's novel with the same title, published in 2007. At the time of its release, Guadagnino's film was named one of the best Jewish movies by popular Jewish media and a modern gay classic by LGBTQ and mainstream media. The success of Call Me By Your Name, a fictional story about a love relationship between two Jewish male Americans in Italy, brought the issues of intersections between Judaism and queer male sexuality in today's public cultural discourse. In this presentation, I will discuss André Aciman's novel Call Me By Your Name and some contemporary works of visual art, such as Oscar Wolfman's Elation and Benjamin Reich's Hasidim Love, in relation to the biblical and rabbinic texts. I propose to look at these works as examples of subversive citationality that constructs queer subjectivity through rethinking traditional religious images and cultural practices across texts and genres, through particular modes of intertextuality and cultural translation. Judith Butler's description of identity as performative ritual includes the notion of bodily inscriptions, which through compulsory citationality establish textual authority as a form of conventionality and normativity. Butler understands citation as a way of accumulating the force of authority through a prior authoritative set of practices. Citation produces a norm, and yet it also produces a viable subject. Butler makes a distinction between forced citations and subversive citations. The texts and works of art that I discuss here could be seen as examples of such subversive citations, as instances of bodily citationality, moments of queering biblical and rabbinic texts cited in liturgy, performed in ritual, and enacted by, with, and upon the queer male bodies through subversive erotic performance. The Jewish custom of wearing the prayer shawl, Tallit, has been derived from the biblical prescription to attach ritual fringes to one's clothes. The sexual meaning of this concept is evident in the biblical formulation, quote, "The Lord said to Moses as follows, speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes in the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe of each corner. That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. Thus you shall be reminded to observe all my commandments and to be holy to God. End of quote. This biblical passage from Numbers 15 shows anxiety around male sexual desire and an attempt of controlling sexual behaviors so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. Through the symbolism of clothes, objects attached to the body. In this sense, Tallit, the prayer shawl, is one of the most sexualized ritual objects in Jewish tradition. It signifies a form of bodily citationality. It inscribes the biblical textual tradition upon one's body, pretty much like circumcision in a way. It performs the functions of what Foucault would call putting transgressive sex into a discourse. Ritual clothes, traditionally worn mostly by men, such as the prayer shawl, tallit, bear homosocial and homoerotic meanings, signifying both religious experience and bodily experience. It is also an identity marker that signifies belonging, cultural home. In some works of art and fiction, these associations turn Tallit into an erotic object, as you can see in this image from Duncan Flaster's 2015 Naughty Jewish Boys calendar. To some extent, this modern tradition of queer reading draws upon the ancient rabbinic forms of hermeneutics. For example, some rabbinic traditions demonstrate the mechanism of homoerotic sexualization of the symbolism of the biblical prescriptions, what could be called homoeroticizing exegesis, which is pretty common, quite common in the Talmud and in the Midrash. The erotic love poetry in the Song of Songs describes sexual intimacy between two lovers, a male and a female, quote, "His left arm is under my head, his right arm embraces me," end of quote. The ancient rabbis comment on this verse, quote, "His left arm is under my head." This is tzitzit, the clothes with ritual fringes, end of quote. This rabbinic commentary draws parallels between the bodily acts of wearing the clothes with ritual fringes wrapped around the head and the acts of lovemaking depicted in the Song of Songs. The Midrash imagines wearing the tzitzit as a sexual embrace between the male god and the male worshipper. There is another homoerotic image of the tallit in rabbinic literature. This time in the context of legal precautions against sexual transgressions. Quote, "Two bachelors shall not sleep under one cover, literally under one tallit, but the sages permitted." End of quote. The sexual assumption of this traditional image of two unmarried men sharing one tallit, again, in Foucauldian terms, puts sex between Jewish males into discourse. There's a tension within the very formulation of this rabbinic ruling. The repressive force of the interdiction, "shall not sleep," is juxtaposed with the alternative rabbinic traditions that challenge the prohibitive law, but the sages permitted. Some other layers of the rabbinic discussion add a normative rationale for the prohibition, quote, "Israel is not suspected of this," unquote. This refers to sex between men, as evident from the previous statements in the text. These ambivalent legal formulations represent rabbinic anxieties around the Levitical ban on sexual acts between males. The Talmudic rationale attempts to erase the social reality of non-heteronormative sexual practices among Jews, the social reality that was documented in other Talmudic and non-rabbinic texts. The text draws upon the rhetoric of sexual othering, contrasting the alleged Jewish sexual self-control against the alleged Greco-Roman sexual excessiveness. These rhetorical conventions were common across ancient cultures, and not only ancient. In Aciman's novel Call Me By Your Name, Elio's fantasies of sex with Oliver translate into Elio's sexual play with Oliver's clothes, his bathing suit, and his bed sheets. While masturbating in Oliver's bed, Elio recalls, imagines, sharing a tallit with another man during Yom Kippur services in the synagogue. The memory of the intimacy of religious ritual participates in Eliot's sexual fantasies and in his sexual acts that express his desire for intimacy with Oliver. Quote, I undid his bed, took off his suit, and cuddled it between his sheets naked. The smell of him was all around me, wholesome and forgiving, like the strange scent which had suddenly come over my entire body when an elderly man who happened to be standing right next to me in the temple on Yom Kippur placed his talits over my head till I had all but disappeared and was now united with a nation that is forever dispersed, but which, from time to time, comes together again when one being and another wrap themselves under the same piece of cloth. I put his pillow over my face, kissed it savagely, and wrapping my legs around it, told it what I lacked the courage to tell everyone else in the world. Then I told him what I wanted. It took less than a minute. The secret was out of my body. End of quote. This image of the Tallit here represents homoerotic desire. Eliot's religious experience is an erotic experience and vice versa. While standing under one tallit with another man in the temple, Eliot is aroused by the intimacy of the moment, the closeness of the bodies, the warmth and the scents, placing his homoerotic desire in the larger context of Jewish history. Eliot subverts the rabbinic image of two unmarried men under one cloak, two bachelors sharing one tallit. These two episodes, one depicting private and transgressive sexual practice in bed, and the other depicting normative intimacy during a public religious ceremony in the synagogue, when one being and another wrap themselves under the same piece of cloth, respond to the rabbinic anxieties by affirming same-sex intimacy as part of Jewish tradition and Jewish life. Eliot experiences the moments of homoerotic intimacy during a religious service as central points of his Jewish identity. Similar to Aciman's novel, Benyamin Reich's 2019 image, Hasidim Love, alludes to the rabbinic image of two young men sharing a piece of cloth, tallit. We see two nude Hasidic boys wrapped in one tallit that covers the lower part of their bodies. Reich's image reclaims and subverts the repressive force of the rabbinic interdiction and responds to this traditional denial of Jewish queer existence to the totality claim of this categorical heteronormative presumption by affirming Jewish queer visibility. This image subverts the traditional manner of prayer when the worshipper covers oneself with a tallit. The implied in this image sexual and romantic interaction between the two men, covered by one tallit, becomes an act of Jewish prayer, to which the tallit, a prayer shawl, refers. The prayer in its turn is represented as erotic intimacy, not with God, but with a fellow worshiper. Oscar Wolfman's Elation shows a series of overlapping images of an older man, nude man in a tallit. Prayer is represented as a dance, and the prayer shawl resembles the wings. The movement and the change in poses create an image of sexual play, but also an image of Jewish tradition flowing across time, a tradition that in a constant change. Prayer becomes an erotic and religious performance in tension with Jewish tradition and with the artist's identity. To conclude, the modern works of fiction and visual art represent Jewish ritual clothes as sexual objects that participate in the erotic performance while all the time preserving the religious meaning. These authors imagine intimacy between men as hermeneutical appropriation, performative subversion of Jewish religious life and texts, merging queer sexual acts and Jewish religious acts in an undivided continuum. They bridge the divides between the sexual and the religious, between the queer and the Jewish, and between personal and the collective. Thank you.